In the year 48 BC, the Roman civil war between Pompey Magnus and Gaius Julius Caesar had reached its climax. After pursuing Caesar throughout Greece, Pompey has managed to catch up with Caesar near the Greek city of Pharsalus. On the 9th of August, 48 BC, Pompey marched his army from their camp to the plains of Pharsalus. Caesar chose to go on the offensive. He ordered his legionaries to advance on Pompey's much larger force to give battle. It was estimated by Caesar himself that he commanded a force numbering some 22,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry. Although outnumbered by Pompey's army, Caesar's force was full of veteran soldiers who had campaigned with him for many years, as far back as his Gallic campaigns 10 years prior. These soldiers had fought countless battles under Caesar's command and were the finest Roman soldiers at the time. To match Pompey's infantry lines, Caesar had to stretch his lines out further. Caesar's main force was commanded as follows. His left flank was commanded by Mark Antony, his center was commanded by Domitius Calvinus, and his right flank was commanded by Publius Sulla. On Caesar's right wing was his 2,000 cavalry, who were vastly outnumbered opposite to Pompey's. Knowing that his cavalry force would not be able to compete with Pompey's, Caesar had an additional 2,000 auxiliary soldiers armed with spears hidden behind his cavalry formation. Caesar estimated that Pompey commanded a force numbering 34,000, 40,000 infantry, and some 7,000 cavalry. Although a much larger force than Caesar's, Pompey's army was composed of newer recruits, who were not nearly as combat experienced as Caesar's legions. Pompey's main force was commanded as follows. His left flank was commanded by Lucius Cornelius Lentulus. His center was commanded by Scipio, and his right flank was commanded by Ahenobarbus, with a river to their right which protected their flank. On Pompey's left wing were his cavalry force commanded by Labienus. Pompey's plan of battle was to allow Caesar's men to engage with his on the main line, while his much larger cavalry force would flank left, crushing Caesar's smaller cavalry force, and then flanking Caesar's engaged legions from behind. With a larger force, Pompey's lines were deeper than Caesar's. Upon their march across the battlefield, Caesar's disciplined legionaries came to a halt and reorganized and reformed into battle formation. Caesar's men, coming within the vicinity of Pompey's men, began to charge their lines. With the infantry engaged, Pompey then attempted to execute his plan. He ordered his cavalry, commanded by Labienus, on his left flank, to charge the cavalry on Caesar's right flank. Caesar's cavalry were vastly outnumbered, and soon enough were pushed back. Eventually, Caesar's cavalry retreated entirely. Unknowing to Labienus and Pompey, this was Caesar's plan all along. While both forces were engaged, Caesar's spear infantry soldiers were marching up the flank, preparing to engage and trap Labienus and his cavalry. Labienus and his cavalry were now engaged by both spearmen and Caesar's cavalry. They were soon overwhelmed. Labienus ordered a full-on retreat. His cavalry fled entirely from the field of battle, with Caesar's cavalry giving pursuit. Caesar's spear infantry marched onward toward Pompey's left flank. They came crashing into the left flank, surrounding Pompey's soldiers from all sides. At this point, Caesar orders any reserves that he had left to charge into the battle. The pressure on Pompey's left flank quickly breaks his legionaries, with many running from the field of battle. Pompey himself was stationed on the left flank. He is forced to retreat, as opposed to being killed or captured by Caesar's men. Seeing that their left flank has collapsed, the rest of Pompey's lines broke out into a full-on rout from the battlefield. Upon their retreat, Caesar ordered his men to follow suit, chasing down Pompey's men into their camps, killing anyone who continued to fight on and capturing any of Pompey's men who had laid down their arms and surrendered. Unfortunately, by the time Caesar's men had reached the camp, Pompey had fled along with most of his other generals. The estimated losses reported by Caesar himself were as follows. Caesar had lost 1,200 men, while Pompey's had lost 15,000 men, with 24,000 men surrendering to Caesar. Though these numbers may not be fully accurate, as Caesar was known to be biased in his reports.